Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Now I'll tell you about the origin of Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations that existed in Crete and Greece during the second millennium BC. I'll begin my story with Crete. People first appeared in Crete during the Neolithic era. Anatolian tribes inhabited the island around the 7th millennium BC. During the Neolithic Revolution. The first settlements emerged during this time, where inhabitants lived in stone houses and engaged in agriculture and cattle breeding. The geographical location necessitated skilled sailing abilities for communication with the outside world, as it was the only means of transportation. Around 3000 BC, the development of metallurgy started in Crete, and its products were distributed throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The island's advantageous location at the intersection of major maritime trade routes from north to south and from west to east led to the emergence of a civilization known as Minoan. It's unclear how this civilization originated, but it's clear that the construction of the first palace complexes began in Crete around 900 BC. At the same time, the linear script and the tradition of stamping seals on clay appear on Crete. Thus, we can begin counting down the history of the Minoan civilization from the 20th century BC. Most researchers agree that the early Minoan culture wasn't a direct descendant of the Neolithic culture of Crete. They believe it was introduced from the east. Early Minoan clothing, architecture, carved seals, and many other objects have analogues in Mesopotamia and Egypt. They also believe that at that time Crete was divided into a number of polities, each with its own center. Only a few centuries later, Crete was united under a single government. It happened most likely around 1300 BC. Archaeologists date the destruction of the first palaces and the construction of new ones in their place at that time. They associate these events with either natural cataclysms or internal disturbances. During this period, the royal dynasty in Knossos apparently united all the previously independent polities of the island. Archaeological excavations have shown that the palace of Knossos surpassed all other palaces on the island in size, luxury, and wealth. It was connected to other parts of the island through a network of paved roads. This palace was located on a low plateau. It was a huge complex with a dungeon and a complicated, intricate plan. The center of the palace was a large rectangular courtyard, around which were hundreds of rooms for various purposes. All of this was combined into a single structure that fit beautifully into the surrounding landscape. Most likely, the Palace of Knossos became the prototype for the mythical labyrinth, home of the Minotaur. The kings of Knossos were given the title Min, which the Greeks took to the personal name of Minos, from which the name of the Minoan civilization was derived. Under the rule of the Mins, Crete became a state with a very high level of material culture and oriental despotic social system. Like the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, palaces were the centers of all economic and cultural life in Crete. This state was governed by numerous bureaucratic apparatus, the presence of which is evidenced by the rich palace archives. The official nobility, along with the highest military commanders, was part of the inner circle of the rulers of Knossos. According to all these signs, we can conclude that at the beginning of the second millennium BC, Crete was included in the system of international trade. It was destined to become a great maritime power, and Minoan Crete successfully fulfilled this mission. Ports were built near all the great palaces, through which intensive trade was conducted with all the Mediterranean countries. A strong navy guarded trade routes and raided islands and coastal lands, forcing weaker neighbors to pay tribute. The first relations between Minoan Crete and their kings settled in the mainland Greece began as a result of these raids. The fact that their kings were originally tributaries of the Minoans is evidenced by the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, according to which Athens paid tribute to the Cretan king with young people. At the same time, the Minoans themselves, being on the island and under the protection of their navy, felt absolutely no threat from outside. This is evidenced by the complete absence of any fortifications around their palaces. In the middle of the second millennium BC, Crete was a great maritime power, fully protected by its navy from external threats and extending its influence to all coastal territories. One of these territories became Achaean Greece, where, under the influence of the Minoans, the formation of the Mycenaean civilization began in the 16th century BC. The Mycenaean civilization wasn't a single state. It was a series of independent city-states that began to emerge in various areas of the Peloponnese, central and northern Greece. All of them were under the strong cultural influence of Minoan Crete, which can be seen in religious rituals, secular life, and artistic monuments. According to archaeological data, Mycenaean Greece was a country with a large population, living in many small towns and villages. As in Crete, the main centers of all economic and cultural life of this civilization were palaces. However, unlike the Crete palaces, which had no fortifications, the Mycenaean palaces were powerful fortified citadels. The most important ones were Mycenae, Perinthos, Pylos, Athens, and Thebes. Each of these citadels was the center of a separate independent state. We can get information about the nature of these states thanks to the deciphering of clay tablets found by archaeologists, written with the Linear B script in the Mycenaean dialect of the ancient Greek language. No chronicles or literary works have been found on these clay tablets. Writing was used in Mycenaean Greece only for household needs and accounting in the palace economy. Therefore, there are only accounting records on the tablets, but they also allow us to understand how Mycenaean societies were organized. The king, known as Vanax, ruled the state and had religious, military, and judicial responsibilities. The Vanax was in charge of all aspects of palatial life, including religious feasts, offerings, and the allocation of goods, craftsmen, and troops. The second in command was the Levagetes, also known as the leader of the people. He was the leader of the military aristocracy, known as the Equata, or companions. The Vanax appears to have appointed several local officials to oversee the districts, including the Choriter, Prochoriter, and the Damokoros. Mycenaean society seems to have been divided into two groups of free men: the king's entourage, who conducted administrative duties at the palace, and the people. The people was divided into territorial communities called damos, each with its own local self-government. The damos were led by an elected leader called the basileus and a council of elders called the gerousia. The Basileus was likely also the commander of the community militia. Royal agents watched over the people, who were obligated to perform duties for and pay taxes to the palace. The lower rank of the social ladder was occupied by the doulos, who were slaves. The slave class was apparently replenished mainly through international trade and the capture of prisoners of war. All land in Mycenaean Greece was divided into two main categories: palace or state land, and land belonging to communities. The palace scribes recorded both categories of land in their tablets. Communal lands, like the lands belonging directly to the palace, were under the control of the palace administration and were exploited by it in the interests of the state economy. The state economy focused on redistributing goods, commodities, and labor through a central administration. The palaces closely supervised various industries and commodities, organized land management, and distributed rations to dependent personnel. From all the above, we can see that the economic system of Mycenaean Greece corresponds to the system of Sumer, Syria, Egypt, the Hittite kingdom, and Minoan Crete during the 3rd, 2nd millennia BC. Most likely, the Chaldean caste patronized the creation of the states of Mycenaean Greece to spread their influence over Europe and the Western Mediterranean. In the next program, I'll talk more about the spread of this influence and the results of it. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss it. At this point, I wish to conclude this video. If it was interesting, leave comments, put likes and repost. Thank you for your attention. See you later. Goodbye.